Now that you have the content on your resume, it's time to go through and do the editing and the styling of your resume. The presentation of how you display your experience and your profile really does make a difference. So, what I normally recommend is to not use a template, and the reason why is a template constricts you, whereas every person is a bit different, and at every stage of your career, it's also going to be different as well. And as we go through, you'll see why not having a template can be really useful to help stand out against the crowd. But the first part about editing is going through and just making sure that everything is matching. And when I say matching, it's things that are alike should be alike. So when it comes to your summary, your experience, your education, those should all be similar fonts, the same spacing, and then same with your content. So just an example here, this quantum metric title that I have. One of the reasons why I like using Google Docs is because we can make sure that everything matches, and then apply styles at a high level. So this quantum metric experience that I have, you see that it's highlighted as normal text here. But what I've done with my other uh, roles and experiences is I've made them a heading 3. So I'm going to apply heading 3 here, and you notice that it changes just a bit. I think it's the weight of the font, or maybe even the color of the font that has been applied there. And what that allows us to do um, is if we did want to make a change, so like let's say we wanted to make this, instead of this off black, we just wanted to make it straight black. What we can do now is say update heading 3 to match, and then all of our other roles will receive the same styling to it. So that forces consistency across your entire resume. And so just going through and making sure that the spacing is correct. And so as I come through, notice that there's a space that's here. And then if there is things that you don't like, so maybe if I want to add some space between the 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 text in this next role, I can go through and say add space before paragraph, and then we'll go ahead and update heading 3 to match. And so as you go through those little details of making sure that everything is aligned does make a big difference in the long run, especially if your role is a detail oriented role like an engineer or a designer. Those little details matter quite a bit. You also see that I'm zoomed in here, 150%. Part of that is so you can see the resume, but another part of that is so that I can see the details here of how the resume is formatted and how it's set up. And then once you've gone through at a detailed level and just made sure that the styling and that the spacing is done, a few other things that are really important or impactful. What I normally recommend for a resume is if you have more than 5 years of experience, you can expand to a second page. If you're coming out of school or you're earlier in your career, having one page is really useful because we want to make your resume scannable. And so if you have more than 5 years of experience and it's just on one page, um, once you get to 10 years of experience, you should have 2 pages because that's an indicator of, hey, I have some weight to my career. And having just one page puts you in that bucket of, oh, I'm earlier in my career. So there's these things that you're signaling with your resume, with how you're styling it, the length of the resume, how scannable it is, that don't come out, you're not explicitly stating, but you're implicitly stating by the formatting. The more exact you are with the formatting, the more you're showing, hey, I'm detail oriented. I can pay attention to the finer points of putting a document together. And so it's going to reflect in, or the way that it will be perceived is the resume that you have reflects the work or the value that you provide to a company. So that's why spending time on this is really important. When I was transitioning between different roles, I was a solutions engineer at Quantometric, and I really enjoyed my job. Quantometric is a great company. I had a great manager. And so I wasn't considering leaving, but I had a mentor that wanted me to consider an opportunity at her company. And so she asked me to or provide my resume to her. And so I did. And her feedback was that it was all over the board. Said that the styling was off, that it wasn't really telling a clear story. And so this was the first time that I had somebody that was really helping me with my resume. And I was somewhat interested, but okay with my role. And so that's maybe why I didn't put so much time and energy into my resume to begin with. But I went through and made the edits and sent it back and got feedback again that I needed to improve my bullet points and the story that I was telling. And so the feedback started out really general, just on the structure and the styling of my resume, and got more specific. And we went through this process 4 or 5 times. And each time I was like, well, isn't it good enough? And that was my thought. Isn't it good enough? And for her, it wasn't. It wasn't good enough. And really, at that point, going from an enterprise solutions engineer, having 5, 6, 7 years of experience in my career, it wasn't reflecting the work that I was capable of. And that's what she knew. She knew me. She knew what I could do and how I presented myself in person. But my resume was not reflecting my capabilities and my abilities. And so going through that process helped me see that the resume is a really important document for recruiters and hiring managers, because it reflects the work and the value and the impact that you're going to bring to a role. So after going through that process of editing multiple times, I was actually reached out to by a recruiter who was looking for a manager, a solutions engineering manager. And I believe that was one of the key aspects of helping me land that role. Of course, I had to go through the interview process, but if my resume didn't match my actual skills and abilities, I don't think I would have made it past the first round at that company. It was called Solvay, which was later acquired by Zoom. So the time and effort that you put into your resume you'll see the return on that, because if you have a mediocre resume, that means that you'll be able to land a mediocre job. And if you have an excellent resume, that will select and allow you to make the leap with a promotion. Often internally, you're going to be asked to provide your resume as you're interviewing, especially if you're transitioning teams. So having your resume up to date and having it match your skills and abilities and reflecting your true value is actually really important. So if you think about it, taking 15 to 20 hours, like if you've gone through all of the exercises to put your resume together so far, this editing part, we're at the very end. We're at the very end. But if you put 15 to 20 hours into your resume and that ends up resulting in an extra 15 to 20,000 in your next career move, in the next position that you get, then that's $1,000 an hour that you're essentially receiving by putting into your resume. Of course, there's a lot of additional work that needs to go in with interviewing and networking, but really it starts with your resume. And so putting your time in here, you'll definitely see the value come out of it later on. So I'm going to pause for a second so that I can make some edits, because as you can see, my resume not really filled out, not completely ready yet to present to others. So I'm going to take a minute to refine and add some additional details here, maybe some additional experiences under the other experience that can really fill out and complete my resume so that it can be as impactful as I know it can be from my previous experience. As you're finishing out your editing, and as I was reviewing my resume, just some things to check. So make sure that you're looking at the fonts, the font sizes, the colors, so that everything matches. This is something that I copied and pasted, and I realize now that it was a different font than my content beneath. Because they're both sans serif fonts, it was easy to miss without checking. And then some other brief notes that I left in this resume template for you is the way that you're displaying or telling your story, at this stage we can adjust that. So if you have a brand name to your resume, if you've worked in one of the big tech companies or Fortune 500 company with a recognizable name in your industry, sticking with the company name first can be really beneficial. It's also helpful to start with a company name if you have multiple roles at the same company. That way, the company is the headline, and then you can show your career progression, the promotion path that you had at those companies, and then you can also list the dates at each of the roles by structuring it in that way. The other thing is, depending on the type of role that you're looking for, if you're looking for remote versus in person, having the location of the job can be something that you decide whether to include or not. Another thing that's helpful if you've had short stints is sometimes leaving off the date or the month in the date. So that way it shows the years that you've been working there. And as you go through the last step, that's probably the most important and will probably take the longest, is going through each bullet point and thinking about the verbs that you're using, and ensuring that the metrics make sense and are legible, but also it's a coherent story. So just reviewing each of your bullet points to ensure that it's not just telling the story in a clear and concise way, coherent and concise way, but also that the bullet points are telling your overall story for the position that you're looking for. And so if you have two different versions of your resume, you'll be going through the exercise twice. So it's sometimes it's as simple as just swapping out the title in different versions of your resume, but more often than not, if you're looking at, say, an IC role, so a role as, say, a software engineer, or you're looking at a people managing role, then those resumes should be quite different, because in a people management role, you may not even talk about the technologies that you're using, whereas in an individual contributor role, that should be the focus of what you're talking about in your bullet points. Of course, there's some blending of both of those, but you do not want to try to blend the people management resume with the individual contributor resume, because then you're in the middle. And so if companies that are looking for managers would say, oh, this person's not a fit, they're too in the weeds with the code, and then vice versa, unless you're looking for something specifically like a lead role, which would be a version of its resume by itself. So make sure that your resume is talking specifically to the role that you're looking for. And if you're looking for multiple roles, have two different versions. And remember, more than two versions, you're stretching yourself too thin, because we do want our resume to at least loosely match what our LinkedIn looks like. So in the case of, if you're looking for an IC role and a management role, then with your title having software engineer or lead software engineer, your resume may not match your LinkedIn word for word, but we want to have it look as closely as it can to what our LinkedIn does. So that way our story is consistent, because that's hiring managers, recruiters are looking for red flags. And so anything that throws up that red flag in their mind could be a reason that they look over your resume, especially in difficult economic markets where there's many applicants, many candidates for each job. You need to have a precise story in order to stand out. So as you're going through, just be aware of the little details, because the little details do matter and will make a big difference in the long run.